Today is a good day for many Syrians because today is the day that Bashar al-Assad has fallen, the dictator that has ruled for more than 24 years, brutally torturing, killing his people. Only a few people understand what that means, and it will be the Syrians that truly understand to have family that were killed, that were kidnapped, that they don't even know where they are because they haven't heard of them. The Syrian authorities had just taken them and they haven't heard from them for years, maybe in those prisons or maybe even worse. So for a lot of Syrians today is a day of joy. This regime has been in power for more than 50 years, first with his dad, and then Bashar for 24 years. And since the Arab Spring, which happened back in 2010, they've been trying to topple Bashar al-Assad. Many factions have been trying to topple him down, and he's held power mainly because he has some good support, or used to have some good support from his allies. And today I want to go through what happened. What does this mean? Why did this happen in this moment right now? And what does the future look like? I'm hoping to speak to more people that have a direct relationship with what happened, Syrians, to understand how they feel. But today I want to kind of just take a different approach and analyze what is happening for you. As I said, this all happened in 2010 when there was this Arab Spring going across the Arab world where it was toppling many leaders. It started in Tunisia. They toppled their leader, who's been in power for decades. Libya, Gaddafi, who was killed in 2011. Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, he was jailed and then died. And also in Yemen, the leader was toppled. And there were other places where this Arab Spring, where people were revolting against their leaders because they wanted elections and freedom, but it didn't actually succeed. One was Bahrain. There's some other places in Iraq and in the Gulf where this didn't happen. But Syria was an interesting one because it continued for many years until today, where there were civil war happening in Syria from different factions that we're going to go into who they were, who they are. And Syria Bashar al-Assad held power in spite of gassing his people, in spite of putting his people in horrendous situations where he was very hated, yet he still held power. And that is because he had some good allies, being Russia and Iran. And they supported him, well, Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah in Lebanon. However, it's not a coincidence that the Syrian rebels actually succeeded now after 14 years of trying to topple Bashar. You have to ask, what is happening right now in the world? Well, their biggest ally, Russia, is preoccupied in Ukraine, so they couldn't provide the right support that they used to provide in terms of weaponry, in terms of aircraft, cover, because they're fighting in Ukraine. Iran has been involved with Hezbollah. Israel has really knocked off its capabilities outside of Iran, and some say even in Iran, through the back and forth attacks that they've had with Israel. And of course, Hezbollah was very heavily involved in Syria. And actually, for a lot of people, that was the turning point where Hezbollah moved away from being loved to being hated because it was supporting the regime, Assad's regime, which was a murdering regime that killed so many of its people. And so the Syrians hated Hezbollah because they were providing that cover. And why did Hezbollah provide that cover? Because they knew that if Syria falls, they're not going to have that support from Syria. Hezbollah is going to be isolated, and Iran isn't going to be able to provide the support through Syria, which it used to do. So Iran's gone in terms of its capability in that region. Hezbollah, Israel just destroyed with the war they just had because of what Hamas did in Israel. And so these rebels chose a very good moment to. This is no coincidence. They saw obviously that Hezbollah couldn't support. Hezbollah is done pretty much. They killed their leadership, and so this was a coordinated attack by different factions, different rebels in Syria to topple Bashar al-Assad. Now, what are those factions? If you see over here, this is what the map looked like just a few days ago. The red was ruled by the Syrian government forces. So even before the major attack the rebels carried out in the last couple weeks, Syria was already divided. The yellow is the Kurdish-led rebels. They had the northeast part, eastern part. The kind of blue over here was the Turkish-backed rebels, which are also known as the Syrian National Army. And on the left over here, this kind of light green was the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is the leading rebel group that is now in charge. And this was just a day or two ago. All this kind of area over here was Syrian government controlled. Look how much they've lost in just a few weeks. You've got this purple is the Kurdish area, and the yellow on the top over there is Turkey-backed rebels, and this area in red is the leading rebel force right now, which is called HTS, for Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And I'm going to go into who they really are, but they've literally just taken over this area in such speed. It was shocking to everyone. This was what they had before on the 4th of December, just 4 or 5 days ago, and they've just expanded this area. It seems there was like a complete collapse of the government. There was not much resistance. And these were the scenes as in Homs, actually, as the rebels entered. This is a statue of his father, Bashar's father, Hafiz. This is jubilation. People will be very confused to why are people celebrating this fall of a statue. And it reminds me of when Saddam's statue fell in the occupation, when the Americans and the Brits invaded Iraq. And it was this kind of the end of this death, this destruction that this organization, this regime brought upon its people, where every person knows of a person that was killed or taken away. And to see the end of that, we don't know what is to happen. We don't know what's, the changes, whether they're going to be positive or negative, but at least we know the end of evil is a cause of celebration for many, of course. Now, what happened to Bashar as this was all happening? Well, apparently he took off on a plane, which people think might have actually crashed. And you can see the plane movements over here. This took away, one of the only flights that took away from near Damascus. It was supposed to go near Homs maybe to land, but it didn't land there, and it lost track somewhere around here. So no one actually knows what happened. There are reports that it was shut down, the plane, but we're going to find out soon what happened. So who is leading this attack and who is now really in charge? Well, the offensive was led by the most powerful rebel force, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. It's an Islamist group that is a former affiliate of al-Qaeda. It's branded as a terrorist organization by the UN, the US, and other states. And its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, is the key decision maker. He once fought with ISIS, the jihadist group, and actually has a $10 million US bounty on his head. Now, during the last offensive, there was a coordination between HTS and the Turkish-backed factions that operate under the umbrella of the Syrian National Army and other groups that encircle Damascus from the south. So what does this all mean? As much as I am very happy to see the end of a dictator, and I'm happy for the Syrians to have a chance of building something after so many years of oppression, I'm also worried. I have lived in Iraq, and I know the experience of seeing Saddam fall and the jubilation and kind of the celebration and the excitement of all that. And today should be a day where people can celebrate the end of such evilness. The question lies, what is next? And I feel this is just the start of something that will be very challenging, because at one front, you have an ISIS Islamist leader who apparently is trying to portray this kind of balance approach of letting other ethnicities and other religious groups to practice their religion as they've done with the areas that they control. But behind that, I feel like this is a PR strategy that they're doing to showcase that they're not as aggressive as ISIS, even though, or Qaeda, which they have worked with in the past. You've got that faction. They've got the Kurdish faction that will not be with HTS. And then you've got the Turkish rebels who are in Syria, and they are very against the Kurdish rebels because Turkey and the Kurds are fighting each other to this day, actually. And Turkey is killing a lot of Kurdish people and denying them a lot of rights in different places. And so I feel like there's going to be a civil war here. It's going to be fighting because it's very hard for, especially when there's a vacuum of power and there's different groups now that have the ability to take that power for their own selves, is to sit down and democratically decide who gets what without any kind of fighting that will happen. Because you can't just become a democracy just so quickly. We saw that with Iraq. It took years and years for anything close to democracy to show up. And if I'm being honest, it's kind of a bit of a wreck right now where there's so much corruption, but leave the corruption aside. What I'm more worried about is the fighting that will occur between those different factions because they're not going to agree. The Turkish rebels, backed by Turkey, is not going to allow the Kurdish rebels to gain much because they're against them. And the Kurds are against the Islamists, which is the HTS, which is the leading group that's taking charge of that. I hope to see them coming together and agreeing how to create an organization that is aligned with the people, that give all the people, the rights that they deserve and should get. But Syria is also a very has many different religious sectors and many different minorities. And one of the things with Bashar al-Assad, even as evil as he was, he allowed these minorities to practice what they wanted to practice as long as they weren't against the government. And I hope that aspect will continue, which is going to be hard to imagine that when an Islamist group comes in, because they, as we have seen with ISIS, what they've done, they destroy anything that is that they don't feel is Islam or Muslims or is aligned to their ideology of what those things are. Now, who are the losers and who are the winners? I want to say the winners are going to be the Syrian people. I don't know how that's going to play. But the definite winners also are Israel, because Israel now has seen not just Hezbollah gone and Iran's influence in the region gone, it's seen one of its main enemies gone, which was the Syrian government that was supporting Hezbollah, that was supporting Iran. The losers are obviously Iran, Russia, and possibly even Iraq, because now there's going to be very large areas in Syria that may be influenced and infiltrated by Islamist groups that will pose a very big risk to neighboring countries. But then again, this is an opportunity. Of course, this is an opportunity for the Syrian people to live freely finally. There's so many millions of Syrians outside of Syria who escaped the war. And this is an opportunity for them to build something very beautiful. And I hope they have the chance to do so.